webinar for today. Thanks for joining us. Our webinar today will be 30 minutes along with time at the end for Q&A. During the webinar, you can send your questions through the chat icon at the bottom of your screen, and we will answer your questions during the Q&A portion at the end of our webinar. We will be issuing PDH certificates for those attending the live session that have elected to receive them. A copy of the presentation will also be included post-webinar. Today, we're going to hear from Steve Schultz and Haley Morrison. Steve has more than 20 years of experience in the AEC industry. Steve specializes in helping Bartlett and West clients pursuing grants, streamlining processes, and finding creative solutions for their project needs. Haley has more than 15 years of experience of marketing and manages the project pursuit team for Bartlett and West. Today, they'll be discussing how writing a detailed Consultant Services RFQ, or request for qualifications, increases your organization's chances of securing the services it needs. A compelling, well-organized RFQ attracts quality consultants and minimizes delays so you can complete your projects to a higher standard sooner. With that, I'm going to turn it over to Steve and Haley to take our webinar away for today.
Awesome, great. Thanks, Rebecca. Haley, say hello to everybody. Haley's going to be joining us later on. Thanks, Haley. Yeah, great. Thanks for everybody taking some time out of the morning to visit with us. We're hoping you can get more out of this. So we're gonna, let's do more with your RFQ. This presentation is based a lot on the RFQs that we receive. We receive quite a few of them during the year, and a lot of times there are questions where we have that we need to reach back out to the agency that's issuing the RFQ. So we're hoping through this you get some little nuggets of information that will allow you to say, all right, if I include this in my RFQ, if I take this in consideration, it's going to save me time later on, and also allow me to get a better return on my replies to the RFQ and the quality of those as well. So we're going to jump right into it, and audience participation is right at the beginning. So Rebecca's going to throw up a poll for us here. And this is, which type of organization are you with? Local government, and you see those in here. I think we've covered the gamut of those. The reason we're asking this question is it gives us a good feel of our audience, and we have a little bit of ability to massage our message here and discuss it. So, all right, great. So local government, 43%. State government's on there as well. So appreciate everybody tuning in. And then one more question, just kind of looking for the sophistication and experience that you may have writing RFQs as well. So how many RFQs or RFPs do you produce per year? And Rebecca's going to be showing those results as those come in. All right, here it comes. All right, great. Awesome. Perfect. So for those of you that produce 10 plus, it's a lot, obviously. So we're still hoping you can grasp some information and some things out of this message. A lot of this is probably repeat of what you've seen, but hearing it from the consultant's perspective, maybe there's some things you can learn. So with that, we're gonna jump right into it. So whenever we are asked by clients to assist in an RFQ, which is not uncommon, or if we're asked to show example RFQs for some of those that issue the first ones, these are the questions that come up. The first one, not necessarily, but just for some of those, we're going to use some acronyms here, SOQ and RFQ. So RFQ is a request for qualifications, so that's what you send to us. And the SOQ is what we send back to you, request for qualifications and statement of qualifications. So I'm sure you'll hear me get those mixed up during the conversation, so don't be embarrassed if you do the same as well. The next one, what information should I include in the RFQ? And we'll run through that, give an example. Does timing matter? That's where Haley's going to jump in on the back end office part of this and how that impacts her and her group. How can I make an RFQ more organized? Same thing. What streamlines that process? Which just runs into the next one. How do I streamline the entire process? All right. So we're going to use a real example here of an RFQ. This is from Lincoln County, Missouri, which is a western suburb or western county just outside St. Louis. This is an RFQ for on-call services that they issued. We're not going to drill into the technical aspects of an RFQ, so that makes an on-call really easy one to use an example. We're just going to drill into what needs or what looks like a good RFQ as far as the body and the substance of it. And we're going to ask you towards the end for your input on what you think is a good RFQ as well. We'll appreciate that feedback that we can offer the group, because there's some things that maybe you've had that eliminate questions that you receive as well. What's nice about this RFQ is right off the bat, it gives all of the key information that's needed for the reader. Generally what they're looking for in this contract, interested firms for general engineering services. Immediately off the bat shows what time that it's returned, needs to be returned by. So that's certainly something we keep an eye on for sure to figure out our schedule once we receive that. Proposal opening, that's a little more towards a contract side of this whenever that occurs, but we do see this whenever we know that they're going to be opened by the entity. The contact information, phone, email, and we're going to talk about that a little bit later, but that's really nice to have up front. And a big one is, when is the award date? So it's not uncommon for us, after we submit an SOQ, if it's not in the RFQ when the award date is, we're going to be calling 2 or 3 weeks later. So having that in there, we're not going to call. We know that by March 24th, we should hear something back. And if it goes probably a week after March 24th, then I would probably be calling Lincoln County just to touch base, and feel like that doing that allows us to show, yeah, we're interested without bugging you. So it's a balancing act there as well. All right. This RFQ is very clear how many copies. A lot of times we see where it doesn't tell us how many copies we need to return. This is hard copies, and they do specifically say don't provide any copies by telephone, email, or facsimile. We're going to discuss that a little bit later as well. Background. So even on a technical aspect, this is great to tell the consultant, how did we get to this point? What brought about requesting this RFQ? And in this instance, they've done that through stating, hey, we're going to have 3 firms. This is what we need their services for. It tells what the term of the contract is as well on this, so it shows the importance of it. On a technical aspect, it's going to maybe talk about the public process that went through to get to this point, what's the need for the project as well. And that's really great information to know how we got to this point. The scope of work. So for an on-call, they've specifically called out what type of services they're looking for, which makes it very clear. On a technical scope of work, this can vary from a paragraph or 2 to many pages, and that really is based upon the technicality of the project, something that takes a engineer or other technical expert. The more that's here for them, the better. An on-call, it's kind of a catch-all, so it doesn't necessarily need that. The proposal format. This is from the agency's perspective. Being able to compare apples to apples, this is great. I've found out that agencies that use a proposal format makes it a lot easier to read. That way you know what order things are going to be coming to you as you read through these SOQs. And for instance, any details that you put in this, for instance, 5 references, that makes it very clear what you're looking for. So we're not guessing how many references. That's pretty typical, 5. Or do you want the references per the project descriptions that go into this? And the other thing that they've stated in here is the minimum insurance requirements. This is something that we see quite often, that it occurs where an engineering consultant firm or consulting firm has been selected and then come to find out in this example that insurance can't meet the insurance requirements. So putting this up front, it tells the submitter, hey, this is what you're going to be required to provide after you are selected. And the point on this one is they tell you what you're going to have to provide, but they're not asking for it in the SOQ. So that whittles down some of the information that if it's not necessary for everybody to submit and it's just for the winner, put it in there, but don't necessarily request it at this time. And evaluation criteria. So this is what's important to Lincoln County, and good RFQs have this in here. So we know what's important to you and what you're looking for. And this can vary. You can state technical expertise is very important at this point, but it gives all of the data that they need from each submittal. And then next step is having the system that's going to be used for scoring is really important for us, because then we know how to place an emphasis of, wow, this is what they're looking for. So once again, for highly technical aspect on a project, or if the project requires someone that's had experience doing it, maybe the experience and technical competence is more like 50% of the job. Or if it's a project that maybe needs a lot of efficiency using a local firm, proximity familiarity can be higher points. So something to keep in mind that can be adjusted. So we talked about the contact information. This is really great. So this tells the consultants, here's who you're going to contact and here's how you can contact them. Lots of times when we receive an SOQ, if we're not familiar with the agency, we're wondering who to call, and then you're playing phone tag back and forth until you reach the right person to ask those questions. So having that detailed information is very helpful in saving your staff from bouncing those phone calls around internally as well. And this, Haley's going to talk about a little bit about the efficiency. So this is an example. They've only asked for one form, affidavit of work authorization. They've included the form, so we're not searching or guessing what it is, which is a really nice aspect of that. With that, I'm going to turn this over to Haley, and she's going to talk about timing.
Thanks, Steve. So, as we're, let me go back into presentation mode here. As we are talking with clients about their RFQ needs and goals, and advising them and maybe giving those examples as Steve mentioned. Another popular question was whether timing matters throughout the process, as well as the timing of the release on the streets, as we say. And it really does make a difference in the quantity and quality of responses that you get, and here's why. One consideration is holidays. I think every engineering or architecture consultant has experienced that holiday pursuit of work. It's due on, say, December 26th or January 2nd, and whoever drew the short straw gets to produce that over that holiday. So be mindful of that. If you must schedule during holiday seasons, maybe build in extra time into your response schedule to accommodate that, and that will just help increase the quantity and quality of responses you get. Another thing that can help is as you advertise the RFQ, maybe email it directly to the consultants you would like to see, compete. And ideally, your due date will be 3 to 4 weeks after you advertise and or email that RFQ. And again, if it's around the holidays, skew towards that four-week window to help us get fully prepared, because there is some upfront analysis that we do before we even begin producing the SOQ. We're talking about it internally and deciding whether we even want to pursue it. So you have to allow time for the whole process to play out, and that'll encourage more consultants to join your process. Another thing that's helpful for consultants is to clearly state how many days will be allowed for the pre-submittal question period and what your process will look like for answering those questions. Is it going to be one-on-one? Is it going to be in a public forum? And if possible, include key dates like shortlist interview dates so your core team could plan ahead to be there around travel schedules and such. Speaking of shortlist interviews, if you decide to hold those, view it as an opportunity to whittle down to your top 3 consultants. We have seen some organizations interview everyone who submitted an SOQ, but whittling it down really maximizes efficiencies and minimizes demands on your selection committee's time. It's also helpful, again, if you can give consultants a couple of weeks to prepare for that interview presentation, so we can put our best foot forward. It's also helpful, again, if you share that interview date early and maybe a couple alternative dates, again, just so the key team members can be sure to participate. Third question we get a lot is, how can the RFQ be more organized? So along those lines, I know Steve alluded to this earlier, the evaluation criteria listed in your RFQ should really be in the same order that you plan to score. We assume that your selection committee is using a grading matrix, so we will typically lay the pages out in the order you've set forth. So if you have that list in the order you like, we will structure our pages accordingly, and we want to make it as easy as possible for you. The other thing you can do is just simply state any required forms clearly and prominently grouped together, kind of towards the front of the SOQ. And if you have a form that you specifically need us to use, Lincoln County included it in their SOQ, as we saw, or some organizations provide a hyperlink or a URL to go out and download that specific form. So things like certificates of insurance, just let us know which forms you need. I have had an experience where an organization kind of buried the need for a notarized form on page 8. And we do go through these with a fine-tooth comb, so we did catch that. But it's a good idea to make sure that is not buried on page 8. It's grouped with the bulk of the information. The other thing you might want to consider is the balance between what you really want to know versus what you actually want to spend time reviewing. So in other words, try to ensure the amount of information you're requesting is reasonable within the page count limitation you've set forth. Other things that will affect that are font size, margin requirements. Those significantly affect how much information we can fit in those pages. So just keep that balance in mind. And finally, it's helpful if you're able to provide some detailed context around your needs, your budget, the type of work you're seeking, any historical context or future plans. That just helps us tailor the SOQ even more to your specific needs. And for the fourth and final question, I'll kick it back over to Steve.
Great, thanks, Haley. Yeah, I'll add, each of these things, timing, when does it need to be submitted, how many people are shortlisted for an interview. This process is cost to the consultant. So we, as she mentioned, we do evaluate each of these. So to increase the number of responses which you're looking for and quality responses, sometimes if we see, wow, everyone's going to be interviewed and we don't feel, hey, we may be the middle of the pack, or we're somewhere there, that may cause us not to submit. So keeping that in mind, that the things that you do that either decrease the time for us to submit or that may be more costly is something we certainly take in consideration when we look at submittals. And then the three that take, Saley mentioned 2 weeks, but we ask for 3 to 4. A lot of times someone may be on vacation. It's really awful for them when that RFQ comes out and they are the person that has the relationship with the agency or the technical expert because of that. So they're spending their vacation time. So just it's evaluated as well on submittals that comes into play. So let me talk a little bit about that as well. How can I streamline the process? The state agencies and DOTs we're doing this pre-COVID, but since COVID, we've noticed that there's a lot more RFQs coming out that allow an email submittal. And what that means is like the wet ink signature that we sometimes see on SOQs that were required before are going away. And that makes our process a lot easier. It saves us a couple of days on the quality of the SOQ we submit. So if a wet ink signature is required on a hard copy submittal, with a lot of firms diversifying and working out of different offices, that could take up to 2 or 3 days of printing the document in one office, mailing it to the project manager that's going to sign the document, and they mail it again to the agency. So something to think about, that's coming really handy post-COVID to save time, and it's a nice feature that we like to see. Digital submissions, we can lock down a document, and if that's necessary, which is also not uncommon for some agencies, but something to think about. Shortlist interview. Once again, if it's not a highly technical project or the value of the project is not a great one, then the shortlist interview is something you should probably skip and just go off of the SOQ. And maybe just ask for more information in the SOQ if there's a concern there. But if it's a $10,000 budgeted project and you're asking for potential shortlist interviews, that raise a lot of flags on our end of, all right, this is our investment if we are not the winner for the potential benefit, raises those red flags. Delay form requirements, we talked about the certificate of insurance. Those things makes it easier to turn them in later after you've been selected. So delaying those certainly makes it more efficient on our end as well. Prepare consultants for next time. What this is referring to is for those of you that put them out, consultants ask for a post-selection meeting to determine what they could do better. So as you're evaluating proposals, ask you to take good notes. So when we call, the reasons you can give for why we weren't selected are the real reasons and not a guess. And so when I've seen agencies on their rating form have comments, that is extremely beneficial. And you're going to find that the consultants that really want to work for you, they're probably going to come back and ask these questions if they aren't already aware of it. So this also gives you an opportunity to see, all right, the next one, these guys really want to work for us, which we know helps out quite a bit. And so an organized RFQ process, just recapping, it's going to save you time, saves the agency's money, lowers the margin of error. And the reference there is you may receive a submittal from a firm that, wow, you really want to work for, you thought you may want to work for them, and they miss a document or a form. So having that information in here clearly shown really helps out. So saves frustration on your end. And at the end of the day, hopefully you get some information out of this that shows that your quality and quantity of SOQs that you receive for proposal is increased, which helps you. So I appreciate everybody's time today and taking the time to listen to us. Rebecca?
Thank you, Steve. Thank you, Haley. At this point, we're going to open it up for Q&A. So if you have questions, comments, thoughts on some of the information that we have discussed today, send those questions through the chat icon. You'll find that in the lower portion of your screen. We'll wait a couple minutes for questions to come in. And as we're doing that, I want to again thank you for sharing your time with us. And thank you, Haley, and thank you, Steve, for sharing your expertise with us today. As a quick reminder, a recording will be available at bartlettwest.com. You can check that out at any point. And I'll switch over here and see if we have any questions that are coming in through the chat. Steve and Haley's contact information is displayed here, so we encourage you, if you are more comfortable reaching out to them directly, you are welcome to do that. So their contact information is there. Like I mentioned earlier, you'll receive a copy of the presentation with our post-webinar follow-up, so their contact information will be provided to you there as well. Steve, Haley, all of our participants today, I don't see any questions coming through. Actually, I do, so thank you so much. The question here is, should the evaluation spreadsheet be included in the RFP?
Once again, the more you provide, the better. It gives us clearly what you're looking for. So we talked about the format, really makes it helpful, and also the order that it's presented in. It's great information to have. Had a recent experience with a agency I've been visiting with, and I've been submitting proposals, and had another conversation with them, and they asked, would you like to see our rating sheet? And I'm like, oh my gosh, I should have asked that question a long time ago. So yeah, we're always learning as well. So having that information is really great, because on that one, they gave a lot of points to the local knowledge, and we're developing that relationship in that community. And so they gave us a good idea of before our office grew in that space, why maybe why we weren't having as much success. And during that post conversations on the previous proposals, it didn't come in, and I just didn't specifically ask for it. So no, that's would be great to have that. Haley, do you have thoughts?
No, I think you about captured it. I did want to reiterate your earlier point that if anyone has ideas as far as what would be good to consider when creating an RFQ, feel free to drop that in the chat box or reach out to Steve or myself afterwards. We're always looking for insight as well.
Yeah, I'd be interested. We had a number of people, and this was the thought on this, to offer how many RFQs you presented. We'd love to hear, wow, I wish consultants would read this in our RFQ, or I've learned from this. We honestly would love to hear that as well. This conversation isn't one that we have often, how to write the RFQ. We give examples, but not in the depths of getting responses of the specifics of what's in the RFQ.
I have another question here. Do you put language in your RFQ regarding that the agreement can be amended so that procurement does not have to happen again? Like if the RFQ was only for the ER, as an example.
Let me make sure I understand. So it's a RFQ that states this is for the PER, the preliminary engineering report, but then it may be amended to include a full design. Is that how I'm reading that?
We'll get clarification here. Yes, that's correct, Steve.
Yeah, so through qualifications-based selection, which you find, all the agencies we work for go through that in one form or another. It needs to be stated in that RFQ that this is for this phase. However, it may go into the next one as well, because you're going to want to receive not only the consultant's experience in writing PERs, or I do a lot of grant applications. That's what I do. So I may get an RFQ for a grant application to assist with that, and it would save the time that it may go into design. So if you're happy with what we're doing there, then you can move in to the next phase. And if you're not starting out that way, then there's nothing that says you have to move into the next phase. So it's hey, we may do this, and please present your qualifications, but no guarantees. So that makes it easy for you to back out of that as well.
We have another question. Thank you, Steve. It says, sometimes it takes a while to have the chosen firm to finalize the scope and fee. When should you contact the firms that were not selected, early on or after the scope and fee is approved? Thoughts on that?
Haley, you okay if I keep answering these, Haley? Is that good? I don't want to. All right, great. I received RFQ from the city of Columbia, Missouri, submitted on it, and was waiting, and I was calling to check. This is where I'm bugging them, right? I don't want to bug them if they're in the middle of the selection, but I want to know, what's going on. And I'm calling or email. Actually, I didn't call. Emailed a couple of times just asking for the status over the course of, it's actually probably 2 or 3 months, because their procurement processes could be pretty lengthy. And I come find out it's going before council that we were not selected, another firm receives it. So at that point, you're like, oh, what, that's a bummer. So to get to the question, I prefer to receive, we have selected this firm and we're in negotiations with them, but no guarantee that we're not going to move to the next consultant. I don't see that there's any harm in the agency releasing that. But yeah, there are some procurement agencies that absolutely won't talk about anything until that point. But if the ranking is on paper and this is who's number 2, then I don't understand why they can't release that information. And I guess the reason we're always looking for workload, wondering how we're going to schedule things. So some of these are big projects, so we're like, all right, we may get started on a huge project in like 3 or 4 weeks. So if we can find out, the earlier the better for us on workload and what we can do. So they're obviously very important projects for a company as well. It's like, asking someone out on a date. Maybe you're like, well, are they going to say yes or no? And if they don't reply, you're sitting there going, what's going on? And so it's really just that natural tendency for someone to want to know, am I selected or not? Am I your favorite?
Thank you, Steve. I'll wait just another moment or so. Thank you so much for sending your questions in. It really adds to the content and the discussion. We certainly appreciate hearing your questions. So as we're waiting just another moment, I don't see anything else coming in. Again, feel free to reach out to Haley or Steve with any additional questions that you may have. So with that, have a great day, and we look forward to seeing you, and we hope to see you again in a webinar in the future.
Thanks everyone for joining us.
Thank you.